Revealed, the amazing treasure in my mom's old wooden box changed my life in 30 days. The moment Sophie Reynolds pulled the hefty lid off the worn wooden box, she felt a rush of possibility, a whisper of change. She had expected dust-covered relics from her childhood, but instead, it was a vault filled with creativity and long-held family secrets. Her hands trembled with excitement as she sifted through the faded letters, vibrant paint tubes, and the worn journal filled with her grandmother's elegant script. Could this really be her chance to reclaim the art that had slipped through the cracks of her life? Yet the thrill was quickly clouded by a creeping doubt. What if she wasn't equipped to handle this treasure? The harsh truth of her modest Indiana town pressed against her chest like a weight. What was an art showcase in a town that barely acknowledged her existence, let alone her family's legacy? The bills stacked on her desk loomed like a constant reminder of her struggles, mingling with the thrill of discovery in a debilitating mishmash of emotions. She felt the familiar tightening in her gut. Would pursuing this dream expose her to more failure? Sophie hesitated, her heart battling her mind's logic. Could she honor her grandmother's memory and truly convey the beauty buried within these pages? Step into the art community and finally make her mark? The voices in her head ignited an internal storm. Did she deserve a legacy when her own journey seemed so fraught with setbacks? Someone like her, a girl from a town that dismissed ambition, longed for acceptance, but feared judgment. Her determination quivered as she imagined the whispers, the snickers, from the local snobs who thrived on exclusivity. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Just days before the showcase, those doubts grew louder, clawing at her confidence the way a predator stalks its prey. Sophie received an anonymous letter, the ink harsh and unkind, declaring her aspirations laughable and her grandmother's contributions irrelevant. The words throbbed in her skull, wrapping around her heart like constricting vines. Was this her punishment for daring to dream? Anxiety crashed over her like waves against a steady shoreline, eroding the shore of her self-belief. Each sound in the old house felt like judgment echoing back at her, pushing her deeper into isolation. She stared at her grandmother's journal, aching for wisdom, but the words blurred as tears threatened to spill. Holding it tightly, Sophie felt the weight of a family legacy that was both a blessing and a curse. Confronted by her own vulnerability, she knew she had a difficult choice: to risk her heart even further, or retreat into the shadows of her past, content but never fulfilled. Either way, the stakes had never been higher. Would she let society dim her potential before she could shine? As uncertainty hung thick in the air, the question remained: could she summon the courage to rise, or would fear continue to imprison her forever? The morning of the showcase arrived with a heaviness that matched the thick fog lingering over her small town. Sophie stood at her easel, staring at the blank canvas. Each feathery brushstroke seemed monumental, filled with the gravity of expectation. Her heart pounded as she faced not just the canvas, but the very essence of her self-worth. The weight of her grandmother's legacy felt both empowering and suffocating. Memories of joyful afternoons filled with paint and laughter danced tantalizingly close, just out of reach, despite the chaos of emotions swirling inside her. Sophie found herself drawn back to the journal. It lay open on the table, revealing words that felt like a lifeline. Art is not created for perfection. It is born from the soul's expression. The familiar, elegant script washed over her, grounding her amidst the cacophony of doubt. Driven by that spark, she picked up her brush. For the first time, she didn't think about judgment or ridicule. She focused solely on translating the whispers of her heart onto the canvas. Each color splashed forth with a cascade of passion, her strokes becoming more confident as she surrendered to the magic of creation. Yet, just as she found her flow, a loud knock echoed from the front door. jolting her from her newfound focus. It was her neighbor, a woman from the local country club known for her sharp tongue and sharper judgments. The sight of her silver hair and perfectly manicured nails sent shivers down Sophie's spine. Still, it wasn't just fear that gripped her, it was the desire to prove herself, to assert that she belonged in this world she so desperately craved. "Sophie, are you seriously going through with this display?" The neighbor's voice dripped with condescension. "Your art isn't exactly conversation-worthy, is it?" Those words struck like bitter arrows, each syllable reinforcing her doubts. The contrast to her grandmother's uplifting words felt like a slap. Sophie took a deep breath, wrestling with the urge to lash out in defense. But the truth was, she wasn't just battling this woman. She was engaging in an internal war against years of self-doubt and fear. "Art isn't just about approval," she replied, her own voice surprising her with its steadiness. "It's about expression, sharing the colors of my soul with the world." The woman's expression faltered, a momentary crack in her facade. Could it be that Sophie's fire inspired something more? The interaction sparked an unexpected resolve. Maybe stepping into the light wouldn't mean dimming others. Perhaps it would inspire brightness all around her. After the neighbor left, Sophie returned to her canvas, invigorated. Each stroke became a defiance against negativity, an act of rebellion against the limitations she'd internalized for so long. As she painted, she started to see something unfamiliar, her own vibrant identity emerging, independent of the dark clouds of opinion swirling around her. This was her moment. Completing the piece felt like an act of liberation. A deep sense of accomplishment washed over her. She felt the clouds of doubt begin to dissolve just as the fog began to lift outside. Clarity surged through her. This was more than mere preparation for a showcase. It was a declaration of who she was, and would continue to be. As she stepped back from the finished painting, a renewed sensation pulsated through her. With the showcase only hours away, Sophie found herself questioning not just what awaited her on that stage, but also how strongly she could stand her ground in the face of adversity. Every fear she'd harbored had morphed into resilience, but now she was left with a looming question. Could this newfound strength withstand the scrutiny? With uncertainty gnawing at her confidence, she couldn't shake the feeling that an even greater challenge awaited her. As night fell, she prepared herself for a confrontation that felt inevitable. With a mixture of excitement and apprehension, she whispered to herself, "It's time to finally let them see me." But was she truly ready to face the critical gaze of her community? Would her art, her essence, be accepted, or would it invite more shadows into her life? Sophie sat at her small kitchen table, the enchanting scent of fresh coffee filling the air. The remnants of her painting graced the wall in front of her, a bold splash of color echoing emotions she had freshly unearthed. Yet beneath the surface of her temporary satisfaction simmered a dread that gripped her more tightly than any previous doubt. The showcase loomed like a thunderstorm overhead, and the fleeting calm before the impending storm only deepened her anxiety. She took a sip of her coffee, realizing how much she had relied on routines to shield her from uncertainty. Every sip felt like a tentative step into a larger world, a world where acceptance was still not guaranteed. As she saved her unfinished thoughts in her journal, another realization struck her. Transition had always frightened her, yet it was also the fertile ground from which new growth sprung. Flipping through the pages of her journal, Sophie rediscovered fragments written during darker times, moments when passion had felt like a distant dream, obscured by the weight of expectation. Here was an artist teetering on the brink of self-actualization and self-doubt, a contradiction she recognized within herself. The understanding rushed in, that the same fears that kept her paralyzed could also pulse with possibilities. The clock ticked on, and she knew it was time to finalize her plans. She had promised herself a quiet confidence would be her new mantra. As she headed toward her easel once more, she faced the unvarnished truth that her journey was only beginning. Each brushstroke held a power beyond perception. It was her story, her truth, and if her art invited judgment, then so be it. She was bound to create, not for the accolades, but for the pure joy of revealing herself, layer by layer, Returning to her canvas brought her clarity. Each streak of paint, each overlap, conveyed fragments of herself she had kept hidden for too long. She began to envision this showcase as not merely an obligation, but a declaration of the vibrancy of her spirit. Thoughts of her neighbor's ridicule sparked a fire within her. She had the power to render criticism obsolete with authenticity. Yet, as the day slipped into evening, doubt lurked at the edges of her determination. Could she truly transform her vulnerabilities into strengths? Would the acceptance she craved be a mere mirage? To tackle this uncertainty, she resolved to connect with her art on an even deeper level. She rummaged through her grandmother's old trunk, searching for the intimate notes and sketches that would tether her vision to its roots. Each artifact sang a story of resilience, notes of encouragement, insights from past failures turned into triumphs, pieces rich with the wisdom of endurance. They served as a map leading to her own untapped potential. The clock struck an hour before the showcase as she stared at her final words from her grandmother, penned tightly over the years. The most powerful brushstrokes aren't mere paint, they are snapshots of your heart. With a deep breath, Sophie unclenched her fingers from the place where she had held her doubts and slowly opened her palm to the truth of her morphed identity. With newfound resolve, she began preparing her presentation, not just of her artwork, but of herself, raw and unfiltered, a mosaic of colors ready for public view. She dressed with care, allowing her vibrant personality to seep into every detail. However, as she glanced at her reference materials, a shiver of anticipation mixed with anxiety coursed through her. The moment of truth neared. In the silence of her aspiration, she could almost hear the crowd outside waiting, judgments poised and ready. But amidst that cacophony, a drumroll of inner resilience, she whispered to the reflection in the mirror, "It's not about their acceptance. It's about finding acceptance within myself." As she stepped out into the crisp night, the stage awaiting her felt like both opportunity and impending scrutiny, an open canvas calling to be filled with her essence. However, before she took her first step through the threshold, a thought pierced her resolve. What if the greatest judgment came from within herself? As she approached the door, she felt the urge for self-doubt clawing back at her. Would the echoes of criticism drown out her truth, or would her passion for artistic expression rise above the noise? Sophie's heart raced as she stood before the threshold, the vibrant life of the showcase pulsating just beyond the door. She could hear the faint murmur of voices, laughter mixing with the clink of glasses, an orchestra of uncertainty playing in her mind. Each beat reverberated like a manifesto of her self-worth or lack thereof. What if they saw her for what she truly was? The thought both terrified and invigorated her. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward and crossed into the crowd. The changes in her environment were abrupt. The bright lights cast a warm glow, illuminating the myriad expressions of curiosity and expectation that filled the room. The sight of her work, colors vibrant against the white walls, felt simultaneously exhilarating and suffocating. As faces turned toward her, she fought the instinct to retreat. Yet she stood her ground, recalling the turbulent journey that had brought her here. "Just be yourself," echoed her grandmother's voice in her mind. This was her moment to embrace vulnerability, not as a weakness, but rather as a bridge toward authenticity. She circled around her nearest canvas, appreciating the way the colors danced and shifted under the light. Each one told a story of struggle, healing, and triumph, but also of fear. She had painstakingly crafted each piece to represent her truth, and now they belonged to the world. As conversations swirled around her, Sophie observed the reactions of attendees. Some leaned in close, their eyebrows raised in intrigue, while others remarked on the emotional depth of her work. With every compliment, the doubt within her began to lose weight. The need for external validation had gripped her for so long, but slowly it felt as if she was shedding that skin. Still, a familiar voice slithered into her consciousness, the dismissive tone of her neighbor from weeks prior. "It's just paint," it chided, filling her with a nagging anxiety. Was this all she had achieved? A few strokes on canvas that could never truly convey her experiences? She clenched her fists, fighting against that insidious doubt. It was time for her to confront not just the external judgments, but the internal ones that had haunted her the most. With determination sparking in her veins, Sophie stepped to the side of her display, allowing herself a moment to collect her thoughts. She scanned the guests, appreciating the unique energy each person brought. There was a mix of admiration, confusion, and even indifference painted on their faces. Reflecting on her own vulnerability, she recognized that it could inspire more authentic connections, both with herself and with others. At that moment, Sophie made a decision. She didn't have to cater to everyone or win every judgment. Instead, she would speak to those who truly sought to understand. With a renewed sense of purpose, she approached a small group of attendees who were animatedly discussing her work. "It's fascinating how you've captured the element of struggle in these colors," one woman observed. Sophie took a breath, feeling the spark of connection. "Thank you," she replied, allowing herself to share snippets of her journey, the fears, the doubts, and ultimately the courage it took to unveil this facet of herself. The conversation flowed, and with each word, she felt a growing sense of empowerment. As she engaged deeper, a fellow artist introduced himself. "I'd love to collaborate with you on a project," he said, his eyes alight with genuine enthusiasm. Sophie felt a thrill run through her. Was this a glimpse of the interconnectedness she had longed for, an invitation to embrace not just her fears, but also her ambitions? Yet, even amid the budding possibilities, a flicker of apprehension lingered. Would she succumb again to the fear of failure in the face of opportunity? Determined, Sophie took a moment for reflection, drawing on the advocacy of her grandmother's wisdom. Transforming her insecurities felt daunting, but the very act of sharing her essence was a testament to her growth, and then, amidst her hopes and the lively atmosphere, she caught a glimpse of the reflection in a nearby glass wall, her own vibrant spirit glistening back at her. The embrace of acceptance was within reach, and just as that realization anchored her, an unexpected voice cut through the atmosphere, a critic from her past, someone who had always been a reminder of her insecurities, stood at the threshold of her showcase, casting a long shadow on her moment. The time had come to face a deeper judgment. Would she let the voice from her past overshadow her journey forward? Sophie felt her breath hitch as she locked eyes with the silhouette at the entrance, Ed, the critic who had relentlessly questioned her artistry back in their college days. The laughter and chatter around her faded into an indistinct hum, replaced by the thundering beat of her heart. This was not just a return, it felt like an undoing, an altering of the very fabric of her newfound strength. She couldn't remain frozen in place, trapped by memories that gripped her like vines. Instead, she positioned herself purposefully, using her art as armor. Each canvas behind her bore witness to her evolution. They were her shield against the bitter echoes of Ed's words. "Isn't it amazing how life can change, Sophie?" He walked toward her, a smug curl to his lip. "It's good to see you're still painting. I vaguely remember your talent." She clenched her fists for the second time that evening. Was this all she would ever be to him? A few brushstrokes labeled as good, not great? "You know, Ed," she found her voice cutting through his dismissive tone, "art is far more than talent. It's about expression, about processing emotions, and it's a journey that evolves with each piece." His brow furrowed, momentarily caught off guard by her response. For the first time since their paths had crossed in college, Sophie felt a rush of control wash over her. She was not there to seek approval. She was there to claim her narrative. She continued, "Each canvas here tells my story of growth and healing, even if it's just paint to you. It's a reflection of my journey." The confidence surged through her as she spoke, her words weaving a tapestry of conviction. "I poured my struggles, fears, and triumphs into these pieces. They represent who I am now, not who I was in your classroom." Ed hesitated, taken aback. As the silence stretched, her surroundings pulsed with the excitement of life continuing to flow, oblivious to the tense exchange happening in its midst. She could hear guests discussing her work, their enthusiasm wrapping around her, bolstering her purpose. "Vulnerability isn't a weakness," she pressed, her voice steady. "It's a strength. These pieces resonate with people who understand struggle, just like I did." Internally, She readied herself for his next jab, but it didn't come. Instead, she watched as he sized her up, searching for an opening. "Okay, I'll admit," he said, almost reluctantly, "this work is interesting. But still, can you really say you've grown beyond just paint on a canvas?" The doubt that lingered from before flared briefly, but this time she had seen through the fog. This was no longer about proving herself to him or anyone. This was about embracing the transformative power of her art. "Why don't you ask the people who resonate with it?" Sophie faced him, keeping her chin up, daring him to challenge her again. His silence felt like acknowledgement. She secretly hoped that this time, it would resonate with him too, perhaps bridging gaps of misunderstanding forged years ago. But one thought remained: the scalding question. Who was she now? With her focus now directed outward, she found herself engaging with other attendees who began to gather, drawn by the tension. They looked to her for an explanation, for the heartbeat of her work. One man leaned in. "I can feel something deep here. What inspires your colors?" As she spoke, unveiling the stories behind her choices, she felt the anchor of acceptance tether her to the moment. Outside Ed's judgment, she was stepping into her own power, finally claiming her narrative. But a part of her still hesitated. Doubts were tenacious, and, while she had emerged victorious for now, the battle with self-acceptance was far from over. Just then, a perceptible shift in the energy filled the air. A young woman approached, her gaze intense, fixing Sophie in a scrutinizing stare. "You don't remember me, do you? We were in the same foundations class." The shadow of a familiar past loomed closer, threatening to unravel the fragile sense of self she had just begun to weave. Sophie steadied herself, poised at the precipice of confrontation once more. Would she retreat into old insecurities, or stand firm in her growth? Sophie's heart raced as she stared into the young woman's eyes, the name barely registering when it surfaced in the recesses of memory. Rachel. They had shared late-night study sessions paralleled by passion and doubt in equal measure. The familiarity, however, only amplified her anxiety. Memories flickered like images on a spinning canvas, moments of fragile inspiration that intertwined with feelings of inadequacy. "I remember you," Sophie managed, her voice lower than intended. "You were always so keen on exploring new styles." Wistfulness brushed against her resolve. Rachel's features softened, and for an instant, the tension between them dissipated. "I admired your work, Sophie. You had a depth to your pieces even then." The compliment hung in the air, tethering Sophie back to an old mindset, one in which she often felt overshadowed. "I've learned a lot since," Sophie responded, drawing strength from her recent experiences. "Art is about continuous growth." Rachel nodded, but her expression betrayed a hint of skepticism. "Or perhaps some have just found a way to mute their inner critic." Sophie felt a pricking of defensiveness. "I've faced my critiques, Rachel, perhaps even more tirelessly than you." The confidence of her previous exchange with Ed surged, challenging the old demons she had fought so long and hard to silence. "You're right," Rachel replied, a thoughtful pause unwinding between them. "But confronting the critic inside oneself isn't easy, is it? I know it wasn't for me." Sophie's instinct urged her to keep the conversation focused on her own achievements, but Rachel's honesty caught her off guard. A flicker of understanding ignited the vengeful flames of doubt that still lingered inside her. "How do you reconcile the moments of critique?" Sophie asked, her curiosity taking precedence over her defensiveness. "What tools have you used to reflect on your work?" Rachel smiled knowingly, the weight of their shared history pulsing in the space. "Self-awareness is key. I journal every day. I track my responses to the critiques and separate them from my work instead of allowing them to define my worth as an artist." The revelation struck Sophie hard. The act of writing hadn't occurred to her not as a means of catharsis nor as a bridge between critique and confidence. "You must have a lot of insight then," Sophie responded, intrigued. "But how do you keep from getting caught in the cycle of negative spiral?" "It's about intention," Rachel explained. "Art should aim to reflect your truth, not the perceptions of others." Sophie felt the foundations of her self-acceptance sway. What if her battle with self-criticism was less about defending her work against external judgment and more about embracing her own authentic voice? Perhaps helping not just ourselves, but also others find their voices is crucial, Sophie suggested. Rachel's gaze brightened, seeming to illuminate something within Sophie, the realization that her art was not merely a reflection. It could be a tool for connection, a portal for collective healing. Just then, she glanced at Ed, who appeared to be engaged with another guest, but occasionally returned to glance at her, his expression unreadable. Sophie brought her focus back to Rachel, who appeared eager to continue the conversation. Before she could respond, Rachel leaned in, her voice lowered. I recently started a collective aimed at encouraging artists to share their journeys openly. I remember you had a strong narrative, Sophie. I'd love to have you join us. Your voice could empower others equally lost. The offer settled around Sophie, weaving itself into the fabric of her thoughts. Could she embrace this opportunity? Could she become more than just an artist struggling with self-doubt? Let me think about it, she replied softly, a swell of possibility coursing through her. As Rachel stepped back, the air charged with energy, a mix of anticipation and fear. Could value be found in vulnerability? Sophie stood poised at the edge of an enticing cliff of uncertainty, staring down into a realm of potential self-discovery. Then, as if on cue, a shrill laugh erupted from the crowd. You've only scratched the surface, haven't you? Ed's voice echoed, blending into the noise, but targeting her like an arrow. Sophie felt her stomach twist. She had faced him once, but was she ready for a second showdown? Would she rise or crumble beneath his gaze yet again? The stakes had never felt higher, and her next move would define her course. She inhaled sharply, the moment of truth approaching. Sophie's pulse quickened as she turned to face Ed, the unfamiliar weight of uncertainty pressing heavily against her chest. She had never shied away from a confrontation in her work, yet there was something altogether different about this. Ed had a way of unearthing her vulnerabilities, laying bare the insecurities she often buried beneath layers of paint and canvas. Her hand instinctively brushed against the smooth surface of her portfolio, a tether to her identity as an artist. What would it take to quiet the echo of his words in her mind? She had so recently begun to embrace her growth and newfound confidence. Now, standing before him again, those feelings threatened to unravel. Is that what you think? Sophie replied, striving for composure. She forced herself to meet his gaze directly, something that felt like a small victory. Every heartbeat pulsed with determination, but deep down, an internal dialogue roared at full volume, urging her to retreat. Are you going to let go of all those old habits, or are you still chasing shadows? Ed pressed. The smirk on his face felt predatory, as if he thrived on her unease. Sophie wrestled with her mind, recalling Rachel's insight about the inner critic. Did Ed represent that voice for her? Was he merely a reflection of the doubts she had fermented for too long? Perhaps I'm just evolving, she said slowly, her words calculated, seeping with a newly found courage. She remembered Rachel's encouragement to own her voice. How sacred it felt to speak her truth, even here, despite Ed's imposing presence. The question was whether she believed it enough to let it resonate. He raised an eyebrow, his facade carefully crafted yet so transparent to her new understanding. Evolve or not, you still need to face reality. It's not just about art, it's about how you're perceived by others. You know that. Sophie felt a familiar ache surge within her but fought to maintain her ground. You're right, perception matters. But what matters more is how I perceive myself and how I choose to express that. With a breath, she steadied her resolve. The world around them faded momentarily, laughter dimmed, colors blurred. All that remained was the confrontation that had her pinned to the ground and the surge of determination rising. Was she ready to bolt past the walls he erected? Ed studied her, the slight shift in his expression hinting at his disquiet. And what is your expression? Endless experimentation? Are you prepared to risk failure again, Sophie? The implications of his challenge echoed harshly. To fail was to be vulnerable. It was what she feared most. Yet wasn't it that the very thing Rachel suggested could become a foundation for her growth, taking those risks, embracing the journey? Maybe we should ask ourselves, she shot back, what failure truly means. I think I've discovered it's just as essential as success. It offers lessons that success often overshadows. Sophie's heart thudded, the courage of her convictions igniting something inside her. Was it that simple? Understanding and accepting the value of her creative self was the true liberation. Maybe the fear of judgment didn't hold as much power as it once did. Ed's brow furrowed, his irritation unmistakable. This isn't just a game you can analyze, Sophie. You're here. You want to be seen, right? By me or anyone else. Her thoughts crystallized. Did she want acceptance or recognition? The validation seemed tempting. Nevertheless, she caught herself. The need for Ed's approval was evaporating. Maybe I want to share my art because it reflects me, not just the narratives you try to impose. The realization of her authenticity became a barrier between them, shielding her from the taunting thoughts that used to chisel away at her confidence. A slow yet certain smile crept across her face. Art reflects truth. I am a vessel for it, not the subject of judgment. Ed's scowl deepened, a fleeting acknowledgement of effort storming across his features. But Sophie didn't look away. Instead, she softened her voice. I choose to let my narrative expand beyond your interpretation. I'm ready to embrace the uncertainties with open arms. As she turned away, a sense of liberation washed over her. The confrontation had tested her, and she realized she had the capacity to confront her inner critic, to refuse judgment from others. Her heart swelled with the electric thrill of newfound understanding, one that could shape both her art and her relationships. With Rachel's words ringing in her ears, Sophie felt a forward momentum propelling her toward new possibilities. What awaited her? The temptation to explore her fears, and a community of artists awaited an art project grounded in vulnerability and truth. As Sophie walked away, the thrill both excited and terrified her. Was it time to step into the unknown, to forge her narrative and embrace the collective power of sharing? The next phase loomed ahead, but there was no way back now. And she was ready to leap. The question now was, into what? The air outside felt crisp and alive as Sophie stepped away from Ed. Each breath ignited pieces of her creativity, sparking thoughts of what lay ahead. The scars of confrontation were still fresh, yet she could sense the indelible nature of her progression. Growth wasn't linear. It ebbed and flowed like the colors she mixed on her palette. Sophie walked through the sun-drenched streets toward the studio she had rented, a small but inviting space that was starting to feel like home. Each footstep echoed a promise to herself: forward, always forward. The cold metal handle of the door felt reassuring under her grip as she crossed the threshold, leaving the doubts of the past behind. The studio was a sanctuary strewn with canvases in various stages of conception. They lay like companions, each telling a story of struggles and triumphs, most of all, her own narrative. With Ed's words still swirling in her mind, the notion of experimentation tugged at her. What if failure was merely the precursor to discovery? Could she leverage her vulnerability to create something magnificent? Opening her portfolio, she flipped through sketches that reflected both her previous hesitations and burgeoning ideas. An inner dialogue began unraveling, stitching together thoughts. If her art was a vessel, what then was she sailing towards? It was time for a new project. An exploration of self, layering her emotions, fears, and aspirations onto canvas with reckless abandon. She reached for a hefty sketchbook and began to jot down ideas. The words flowed with an intensity she hadn't felt in ages, each one embedding itself deeper into the fabric of her creative vision. What if I invite others to join me? The thought struck her like lightning. Art as shared experience. The thrill coursed through her veins. Sure, it could be risky inviting vulnerability into a space that had always felt like her sacred retreat. But wasn't that what she was learning to cherish? A community of artists willing to expose their truths through their work, just as she was. With renewed zeal, she envisioned a series of collaborative sessions, each tied to a theme of acceptance, the celebration of imperfections. She needed to reach out to fellow artists, those with whom she had previously hesitated to connect. Fear had often kept her at a distance, but now she felt a compelling urge to forge links, to build a network grounded in authenticity. Just as she settled into her work and began sketching potential layouts for her project, the phone buzzed, an unexpected jolt that caused her to jump. A notification pinged on her screen, an invitation to an informal gallery opening later in the week. A space designed to showcase emerging artists. Her heart raced with various emotions. This could be an opportunity to connect with artists who might resonate with her vision. But the thought of showcasing her concepts, still raw with potential, clawed at her insides. Would they understand? She questioned herself, battling doubt's insistent grip. What if her project was misunderstood? The pressure to conform to collective expectations loomed like a shadow. Yet, beneath her uncertainty, a flicker of resolve ignited. Acceptance is part of the process, she whispered under her breath. Perhaps their interpretative lens could enrich this journey. Embracing the uncertainty was the key to moving beyond her comfort zone. Taking a deep breath, she typed out a message registering for the event. With each keystroke, a mixture of fear and excitement stirred within her. Signing off, she leaned back against the studio wall. Doorways had begun to open, not ones she had anticipated, but those leading to unfamiliar paths. With anticipation bubbling inside, Sophie accepted the reality of her chosen leap into artistic exploration. The anticipation of the gallery opening overshadowed her previous fears, filling her with a drive she had only recently discovered. What would she unveil at this event? As she immersed herself in her sketches, a thought flickered unbidden across her mind. Had she ventured far enough into her own depths to unearth something unexpected? Would her engagement with others unravel even deeper layers of her own experience? The echo of Ed's challenge remained, "Are you prepared to risk failure again?" But Sophie felt assured in her footing, a prelude to the exciting unpredictability ahead. She would embrace every wave, success or failure, as she swam into the depths of creativity. The question now lingered: would the confrontation within herself reveal a treasure greater than she ever imagined? The time had come to reveal it, but what awaited her at the gallery could reshape everything. As Sophie transitioned from the confines of her anticipation to the thick reality of the gallery opening night, she felt an unsettling mixture of excitement and dread. The canvases waiting in her studio seemed to pulse with energy, reflecting her every wavering confidence and budding aspiration. Each stroke of her brush had been a landing place for her feelings. Now, those very works were set to be judged under the scrutinizing gaze of others. Sophie arrived at the gallery early. The anticipation of blending her narrative with those of other artists, making her heart race. The interplay of colors within the space vibrated against the stark white walls, transforming the intimate setting into a tapestry of individual dreams and collective stories. The chatter of fellow artists buzzed in her ears, lively and unrestrained, each voice a testament to the festivals of courage they had embraced. As she wandered from piece to piece, she scrutinized the stories sprawled across canvases, each representation of hope in its raw, unfiltered form. The myriad expressions stirred something within her, pushing her to confront her own hesitations. Had she been holding back, presenting a polished version of herself when the world craved authenticity? What if she allowed the imperfections to be on display? Would they resonate or repel her audience? Taking a deep breath, she caught her reflection in a piece framed decoratively. It reminded her of her own struggle, her creative journey now laid out before her eyes, an uncharted landscape. In this reflection, she saw a new version of herself, one ready to embrace vulnerability and all its capsized glory. She was no longer just a participant in chaos, she was becoming its architect. Gathering her courage, Sophie slipped into conversations with other artists, individuals who had once seemed so intimidating. With each exchange, she reevaluated her self-imposed barriers. The insecurities that had previously silenced her began to unspool. What if she shared her collaborative project idea tonight? What if she invited them into her vulnerable world? The thought ignited a nerve, a shocking pulse of thrill that surged through her. After exchanging pleasantries and laughter, Sophie gathered her breath and approached a small group engaged in animated discussions. The words formed in her mind, ready to burst forth. She introduced herself, her voice steady despite the fluttering in her chest. "I'm exploring a project about acceptance and imperfections in art, and I was wondering if you'd be interested in collaborating?" The words flowed, each one a seed of connection. The responses were varied, a symphony of intrigue and contemplation. Some expressed interest immediately, while others hesitated, reflecting on their own artistic agendas. But there was resonance. Seeing individuals grapple with the notion of vulnerability opened a previously sealed window within Sophie. Perhaps collaboration wasn't just about blending techniques. It was a radical sharing of personal truths, a transition from the solitary to the communal. With newfound resolve, she shared snippets of her work, her colors, her emotions, the underlying chaos that she had learned to embrace. The tentative spark in their eyes mirrored her own, transforming the gallery into a conduit for possibility. Yet, as her inhibitions ebbed, doubt returned to buffer her enthusiasm. What if these artists exposed parts of her that felt too raw? Would she be able to handle their feedback? The fear knotted in her stomach. Acceptance is the journey, she muttered inwardly. But how deep do I want to go? As the night wore on, the underlying excitement tinged with fear began to morph into something unmistakable, a call to action. She could no longer remain in the shadow of her canvases and peers. It was time for her to forge her own artistic identity unapologetically. A moment of clarity washed over her when she caught Ed's eye across the room. He nodded, a silent encouragement, cementing her conviction. The confrontation with others had not only reshaped her approach to vulnerability, but also reaffirmed her identity as an artist. With the gallery bustling around her, Sophie felt energized, prepared to take the leap into the collaborative waters she had once feared. But as she captured this turning point in her mind, she realized a sobering truth. Exposure can lead to clarity, but it can also unearth unexpected shadows. What realizations would come to light through this journey? Would the scars of vulnerability heal her, or would they deepen? As she took one last look around the gallery, she felt a significant shift within, one that suggested that true artistry lay not only in showcasing successes, but in laying bare the complexities of every experience. The evening's revelations had opened doors she hadn't known existed. What awaited her beyond the opening unraveled truths, buried connections could alter the very fabric of her creative journey. Her heart raced again, this time not with uncertainty, but with the thrill of what was yet to come and the promise it held. How much of her true self would emerge through this embrace of collaboration? As dawn broke over Indiana, Sophie Reynolds stood before her easel in the studio. A whirlwind of emotions settled into a focused purpose. The vibrant colors she'd splashed across canvases now felt like echoes of her past struggles, paired with an exhilarating promise for her future. The showcase had been a painful yet liberating experience, revealing new depths to her artistry and showing her the true power of vulnerability. Gone was the uncertainty that had once gripped her. Standing on the precipice of her next project, a series of collaborative pieces that would invite fellow artists to explore their narratives, Sophie felt a solid confidence for the first time. Tethering herself to the essence of shared experience, she envisioned each artist participating as contributors to a larger tapestry, a mosaic of struggles and triumphs woven together. She had sent out invitations, each letter infused with sincerity and excitement, believing profoundly that this project would cultivate a community thriving on authenticity. Each response she received expressions of enthusiasm and eagerness only bolstered her commitment, proving that her newfound strength resonated not just within her, but echoed outwardly. As weeks passed, the collaborative sessions began to unfold, each one a testament to the power of connection. Artists of varying backgrounds came together, revealing multifaceted stories through color and form, raw expressions filling the studio. Sophie's heart swelled with pride as she facilitated dialogues about acceptance and the beauty of flaws. She was no longer at the mercy of her past. Instead, she was guiding others through their journey toward vulnerability. On the day of the exhibit showcasing their work, a stream of guests filed into the gallery, curiosity swirling in the air. Sophie stood just outside, a nervous excitement bubbling up inside her. This was her moment to celebrate all that they had accomplished, to manifest her self-acceptance. In a moment of quiet reflection, she recalled the sting of ridicule from her neighbor and the critical eyes of Ed. None of it mattered now. She had established her place not only as an artist, but also as a leader, creating a safe space for others. As the night progressed, the the gallery buzzed with excitement and admiration. Guests engaged with the art deeply, each canvas labeled with an artist's story, a tangible embodiment of struggles and triumphs. Brett, a once anonymous artist, approached her with a heartfelt smile. "I've never felt so connected to my work before." "Your vision brought us together, Sophie," he admitted, gratitude shining in his eyes. Sophie surveyed the room and felt an overwhelming sense of belonging. Her art, cultivated through vulnerability and openness, was securing its place within the community she had so desperately sought. An unexpected rush of warmth flooded her as she caught a glimpse of Ed conversing with one of the artists. The air was thick with respect, a silent acknowledgement that the definitions of success written in past encounters had evolved. "Are you prepared for what comes next?" A fellow collaborator joked lightly, breaking her reverie. Sophie chuckled, nodding firmly. "As prepared as I ever will be," she exclaimed. The excitement bubbling within her felt invigorating, and the apprehensions of her past were fading like distant whispers. Tonight, her heart and mind melded seamlessly. She had risen from the insecurities that once confined her into the arms of confidence and collaboration, an artist at the helm of a movement. Her grandmother's legacy was being honored not just through paint and strokes, but by offering a voice to those who felt unheard, much like Sophie had so many times. As guests continued to admire and converse about the art, she felt gratitude swell within her, a fierce determination interlaced with satisfaction. This was the moment she had fought for, the transformation from fear to fulfillment realized. This exhibit was not the end, nor the beginning. It was a continuation of a journey paved with genuine discovery, a springboard into broader horizons she longed to explore. With her connections solidified and creative opportunities blossoming, she stood tall, her heart brimming with pride. Sophie Reynolds, the artist who once hesitated, now boldly stepped into a new chapter. Ready to face whatever lay ahead with the same vibrant colors she had poured into her canvases. You need to subscribe now to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Seriously, it makes a difference. Comment your reactions and theories. About the ending, let's discuss. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share. True fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.